So how many YSAC programs are there?
There are 9.
9?
Yeah, there's 9 across, and coast to coast, Labrador to British Columbia.
And so was the Labrador one the first one?
No. Actually, one of the first ones was Nimki and White Buffalo.
Oh, yeah. Nimki's a great name. Where's Nimki?
Nipkinakwagan is the full name.
Nipkinakwagan?
And
Nice.
it's just outside London, Ontario.
Okay. I'm not sure where that is. It's a long way from here though, I guess.
Really?
Oh my goodness, you just drove right in front of us. You
Got that on film.
beanie.
That's how Canadians drive.
It was probably a Kiwi. Like they go, where am I?
I guess the closest city that you might have heard of would be Toronto.
Oh yeah. I flew in there once on my way to Banff, Calgary. Look at that. Someone's had a really bad go on the tyres. Huh?
Yeah, that looks like a semi-trailer or something.
It does. So the Thunderbird Partnership website,
Yes.
my personal heaven on earth. Whenever I go and speak to people in New Zealand and they go, well, what can we do for these kids? I'm like, you need to go to the Thunderbird Partnership website and let me show you what those guys can do. So how long ago did that get started?
That started around 2001. Yeah.
It's
And,
an amazing collaboration.
It is. It's a real strong partnership across the country again. So it is a national organization.
Yeah.
And yeah, they do tons of great work in both publications and just advocacy work and in training and research. Yeah.
I like that they've got all of their, your cultural competency forms, your enrollment forms. They've got really good examples of the ones that they use. So is the people who are involved, are they both adult and child substance misuse providers?
Yeah. So Thunderbird Partnership Foundation would be like YSAC's partner.
Yeah.
And they're so they focus on both the adolescent and the adult treatment centers, as well as the community-based programs. So when you were talking earlier about Suboxone and Methadone, that's something they'd be heavily involved in when there's different trials or different programs set up at a community level, a First Nations community level.
Right.
Yeah.
So how's Thunderbird Partnership funded and managed?
They're funded federally, so through the federal government. And then their board of directors is made up of representatives from each of the provinces and territories in Canada.
Right. And so their representatives, are some of them tribal elders, or are they all people who are actually from the field of substance misuse service provision?
A mix of both.
A mix of both.
Yeah. So they have strong cultural and elder representation. They have strong representation from mental health and from addictions.
Yeah. It's just the greatest website. I love it. Really love the videos that are on there. I love the bookshelf with all the little documents on it. It just, it just is. It's like so clever. I think, in New Zealand, Matuaraki, Matutina, I can never remember which name it is, but they keep changing names and things. Anyway, they're having a go at starting to get something together like that, but I think we're a fairly long ways off it being anywhere near as good as that. Yeah. So the YSACs, the ones for the children, do they get funded federally, or do they get funded by the actual state that they're located in, or are they funded by the tribes?
No, and it's a little bit complicated. They're funded federally through the federal, it's called Brighter Futures Initiative is what it's called. But that money is set to their provincial location and then divvied up from their region. We call them regions here.
Okay.
Canada's broken into several regions for federal funding. And so the money, while it comes from the main federal pot, it gets divided up regionally and then given to the treatment centers.
So is there complexity from the regional providers of funding that means that there is an imbalance between how the different YSACs are funded in different regions, or does the money tend to get to where it's supposed to be going fairly intact?
For the most part, it's pretty good, although although there are some regional differences, sometimes with timing, sometimes with what's considered WISAC eligible versus not WISAC eligible. So there are some, of course, whenever anything filters through anything, something like the telephone game, something gets lost in translation. But for the most part, it's pretty standard.
Yeah. Okay. And when a WISAC gets funded, does it have to report on the contract that it's funded under on an annual basis?
Yes. So everybody has to do an annual report and an annual audit. And originally, funding was only 1 year long.
Okay.
It has moved, and depending on what region you're in, there are now 3 and 5 year funding agreements. So
wow.
It's been a lot better in terms of, because everything happens on a 5-year cycle. Strategic planning happens on a 5-year cycle. Accreditation happens on a 3 to 4 year cycle.
Yeah.
So also worrying about funding every year was a burden, a reporting burden.
Yeah.
So it's better.
In terms of accreditation, what sort of accreditation do the WISACs have?
So we have 2 different things in Canada, depending on what province you're located in. Some provinces require that providing residential services to under 18 requires what's called a provincial license. Now it depends how far First Nations and Inuit are with self-governance, whether or not a provincial license is a requirement for these treatment centers.
Right.
So some centers are both licensed and accredited, and some are only accredited depending on that jurisdictional stuff.
Sure.
And then accreditation is done by an arm's length government, and what's considered an arm's length to government body.
Yep.
And WISAC originally put out a call for proposals to review the different accreditation options that were available, and we selected one. And then about 8 years later, we did our call again, and we selected a different one in that round. So we're currently, most of the WISAC centers are accredited by the Canadian Accreditation Council.
Right. Brilliant. And then, of course, I assume where you're on tribal lands, you'll have some sort of a accreditation or licensing process that those tribes who have authority over those lands will potentially require?
Not licensing or accreditation in that regard, but sometimes there are different service agreements because you're on the lands that have to be maintained, or tri-party agreements, or
or memorandums?
Memorandums of understanding. Yeah, depending on where they're located, there's different, and depending on their infrastructure, who owns their infrastructure, there might be different agreements that are signed.
Have you got any instances of where any of the tribes have actually put their own resources into services specifically for children on their own lands?
Yes, actually that's the case with the majority of the WISAC centers, that when the call for proposals came out, that was one of the criteria, that whoever was applying to host one of these centers would have to build and take care of the land and the building.
Right.
So there is definitely communities that have invested their own resources.
Brilliant. So, but also they have the authority over those building lands and resources, which means they have overall authority and responsibility for any of those children that are in there. So that probably tribally works out as good for them to not feel like they've got somebody else on their lands, I guess, making up the rules for children that are on their lands.
They don't have any authority over the treatment services. That's usually written into the agreements that there's only going to be licensed or accredited facilities running through there. So that's sort of I get what you're getting at, sort of an insurance policy.
work in one of those places, would the local tribe come and go, well, you better come and hang out with us and learn a bit about us?
Well, for the most part, the staff are from the location